thank you so much for organization and this really cool smart talk. And my personal thank you to Svitla Systems for this and doing for such a long time, and I really appreciate it. So and thank you everyone for joining us, and let's start and let's talk about top things we do wrong with telemetry data in .NET, and it is based on my experience, and I'd like to provide some information that might be useful for you, and some code snippets that you can just take and start using on your projects, or if you're going with new project, you can take some approaches that I use it personally, and they are battle tested for me. So if you didn't meet me before, a couple words about myself. I am engineer. I am generic engineer with some constraints. I am focusing on C# and Microsoft Azure, and for my recent project, it's mostly on Microsoft Azure Cloud. I am Microsoft MVP in the dev technologies, and also I am solutions architect at SoftServe. So presentation and all source code is available on my personal webpage, ifesenko.com. So if you want to find any other recordings from previous session, from previous topics, feel free to go and navigate. And yeah, C# my favorite language, and I would say I'm best friend for C#, and also you can find that C# finally has best friend attribute. So, and the base of it is from machine learning ML.NET C# project. So what is our agenda for today? For the next 30 minutes, let's say we talk about telemetry data, what we are doing wrong, what we can rework and redo to make sure that we get more useful insight from our application, from our solutions. So maybe we break something that you already done, but no worries, it's for good. So, and let's start with definition of telemetry data, because it's not usual still for us to talk about telemetry data and approach related to telemetry data, because we have some old applications, some old architecture patterns, but now we can align on this term. And telemetry data is not something that going from software engineering. According to Wikipedia, telemetry is a collection of measurements or other data at remote or inaccessible points, and transmission to receiving equipment for monitoring. So, and now we have some such complex systems in our software engineering, in our solution, and you can see the bottom data path, and you maybe recognize that it might be structure of your application. When you have request, HTTP request, you have ingress controller, maybe you have API management or some API gateway, you have additional services, and after that you can provide response to your consumer, right? And this is two-way, and it's not just simple request from user to one service, right? It goes through different layers, and it depends on your architecture, on your solutions, how many layers do you have. And the problem there, if something goes wrong, how to find which component we should review and analyze, and what goes wrong. We received 500 and 500 because our origin source code raised some unhandled exception, or it might be our application gateway is not configured properly, or something like that. So that's why we need to collect and work with telemetry data a lot in nowadays. So telemetry data, in other words, more familiar for us. There is a good acronym, MELT. MELT stands for metrics, events, logs, and traces. Just to align a few words about each of topic. Metrics, it's pretty simple. This is number. It's something that you can measure, and this is number. For example, your disk usage, it's more than 80%. Your disk usage, it's 80%, and you can configure a rule that, right? And maybe CPU load, you use 30% of CPU only, something like that. Another term is events. It's something happened that's already happened. Maybe you receive request from user, or your application started, or your worker stopped processing events. So events are messages. Also, metrics and events are good, but if you want to get more details, usually we start to write some text, free-form text, and we call this logs, right? When we depends on different level of application, maybe for our development, we write everything as possible, each line, and in some language they don't have a good IDE or debug tools, and they have only one way to write, for example, some logs with information about state of program, about values. So it's really powerful tool. But all three of them cannot live without some correlation. And there is another term, traces, that are chained, and you can trace everything, for example, from your request, from your event, goes through logs, and also you can navigate and say, okay, during this program execution path, I see that I wrote several logs, and also I captured a several metrics. So, and you have correlation across all of this telemetry data. So, and now we are good with understanding what is telemetry data, what are main components of telemetry data. So let's talk about telemetry data life cycle now. This is my favorite picture, and I really use a lot because it demonstrates our reality. Because usually when we start a new project or working on existing project, we might produce our own logs, events, metrics, or we might capture from existing, because we don't write everything from the ground. Right? We use some existing components, existing packages, and they also produce some information. It might be metrics, logs, or events, and you can capture inside your application. Now it's also part of your application, and you incorporate your app with telemetry data from other packages. So once we're done, we definitely want to transmit somewhere. I know we can use some file system for that, but if you're working with distributed systems, I would recommend to go for each server and collect this text file, and after that merge them somehow to combine data and analyze this data, right? Maybe you have one storage and send information to this service, or maybe even you write to console log, and this automatically collect it and transmit it into one storage that collects across all your servers, application, all your runtimes. After that, it's a good idea to analyze. Usually we analyze is when everything goes not smoothly, because if everything is good, we usually don't take a look, but it's not a good idea. And when we analyze, maybe this is some proactive monitoring, we can go and store this information. Also, we can store information, but do we need to store for 1 year, 1 month? It depends. For example, if it is some healthcare or some other industry, you might have some policies or it's government policy, and you have, for example, data retention for 10 years. Not sure for logs, but sometimes for audit or some other information, you should store this information for a long period of time. If you have some, I don't know, policy, and you are good to store only for last 30 days, or 3 days even, you can delete data after that. So usually it's full life cycle, right? But what I met from my experience across different teams, actual telemetry data life cycle looks like we produce, transmit, store, and delete. And we, as I mentioned before, even if something goes wrong, we don't analyze, because it may be hard to analyze, because it's not easy to analyze, and it's much easier to try to reproduce on your local environment, and you cannot restore entire picture from your logs, events, and metrics information. So, and usually you might end up with I call real telemetry data lifecycle, when you produce and only one action you actually do with this data, delete. You or automatically some service delete this information, and we just say, okay, we use logs, but we just produce, and that's it. And we send them somewhere, and after that we delete them. So, and this is true. And one of the reason why you don't analyze logs, because you have a lot of information and you don't know how to process this information. And maybe you have gigabytes or terabytes logs, and sometimes even happens that your logging system might break your entire solution service. And this is a real case when, for example, not only for single companies. So I would not say this is common, but sometimes it happens when you write so much logs information, so you have outage, for example, for your service, and you cannot process this large amount of data, and also your system cannot process, and you have outage of your service for end users. So your internal stuff breaks entire system. So we should be careful with that, and make sure that we write only information that we need and that we are going to use. So also please be careful with that. And as I mentioned, you always have a choice, because now it depends on us, because our end users don't want to know about our logs, our audit, about our information. It is only for us. So we are producers and we are consumers of this information. Oh, and my recommended choice, if you're starting to select some solution for your system, or maybe you think that, okay, nlog or log4net is not enough for my system at this stage, please consider 3 main points that are very important from my opinion. First of all, it should be open standard. So to make sure that it is not vendor lock-in for your log system, because it's a good, you can start with some nlog or log4net and create everything, but you can write to file, or maybe you need to write somewhere else. And this is a problem, right? Because there is no integration. It is some internal format you configure. There is no standard, even across your organization. If you use the same library, the same approach, you might have a different vision how to implement, and there is no ability to change or create maybe additional connector for that. So please take a look about capabilities and integration with different platform, because usually it's not enough just to select the best tool that might work only at this moment. And definitely you should have full control of your data. If you want to modify or maybe filter your data even before you write to some service, you should have this capability. You should have some middleware if you want to process and integrate your business logic inside logging mechanism. Because if you want to maybe remove some personal PHI data, right? Or maybe you want to incorporate some additional data and you want to modify, you definitely need some accessibility option for that. And for sure, you want to have some end-to-end implementation to achieve our desired telemetry data flow. So how you can emit this data, how you can record this data, how you can transmit, analyze, and store this data. Because it's also important. You don't want to just select one tool and start writing a lot of components and integration to achieve everything what you need. But some basic stuff you can get out of the box. So, and let's talk about tool set that I found useful for me, and it is working good, and several projects already went very smooth with this integration, and I would recommend to use for you as well. So first of all, and this is most important, it's Open Telemetry. Open Telemetry, if you had heard about before, this is collection of tools, APIs, and SDKs. It's not tied to C#, so it is standard. It's standard with specification first, and covers different languages and different tools and have integration. So it's something like HTML5. You have standard and you have different browsers to implement this specification. Yeah, there are some difference, but good thing that Open Telemetry is open sourced and implemented and owned by different companies. So there is no vendor lock-in, for example, by Microsoft or Google or Amazon, something like that. So it is consensus of different vendors, and there is no vendor lock-in. And also you can participate in development if you want, but standard is already there. You don't need to reinvent wheel, and you can start with definition for logs, for metrics, for event, how you want to write, how you want to collect them. So it's one-stop shop for all your melt and for all your telemetry data. And for some additional information, because Open Telemetry now covers traces, but logs is under development and it's not integrated fully. So some in preview, something in early preview stage, but they are working on it. But for now, for logs, I would recommend to use Serilog, and Serilog can be integrated with some Open Telemetry data, but for now, it's not ready for production. So Serilog, it's structured logging and on steroids, and easily can be integrated with your solution, existing or new solution. It's really easy. I would show in a moment how you can do and provide some recommended configurations that you can start. And of course, for your local development and your production system, you should have some monitoring tools. And Azure Application Insights works perfectly with OpenTelemetry. So it supports OpenTelemetry. So you don't need to use Application Insights SDK directly. So you can just use OpenTelemetry SDK and say that, okay, I want to send my telemetry data into Application Insights. Also, for reading logs, you can use SEQ. This is a tool for local development, because if you want to have the same like Application Insight provide for you on New Relic or Datadog, for your development purposes, you don't need to spin up your instance. You can use some local tools that you can easily run using containers. And Jger, this is one for distributed tracing. There is also Zipkin, but I prefer Jger, and it's more modern tool, and SEQ for logs processing. So I think we cover all base stuff in terms of terminology and approaches, and now it's a good time to see demo. But before demo, I see that there are already some questions. Let me quickly check them and see, maybe we want to cover them now. Let me open chat. Yep. So first question from Bogdan. Do you recommend using log analytics as a central place to store and analyze application and platform telemetry data in Azure for small to middle-sized projects? If yes, does it make sense to have separate log analytics resource per environment or per subsystem? Definitely log analytics. If you're using Azure Cloud, yes, log analytics is a good, and also integrated with services, many different Azure services by default, and by the way, Application Insights now also for all new instances of Application Insights. Behind the scene, there is log workspace, log analytics workspace should be created. So yeah, this is future, and also you can send your all telemetry data from application to log analytics. So if yes, and I would say yes, does it make sense to have separate log analytics resource per environment or per subsystems? It depends on your architecture, on your workload. For recent project, we have a multi-region deployment approach, and we create log analytics, several instances of log analytics. We have one log analytics instance per region, and also we have one log analytics instance for some global components. For example, if you have some build agents, or you have some global components like front door, or that use it across regions. So it's much easy to create a separate instance and write logs to global. Or if you're working with region, you send your logs to dedicated log analytics instance for this specific region. So yeah, you can create more than one. Okay, what are your Bogdan, I guess I provide answers to your questions. So if not, just feel free to ask what might be I forgot. So next question from Max. What are your 5 favorite tools for metrics? This is Serilog and Serilog extension, I would say, but it's Application Insight, also tool, Jger, SEQ, and Grafana. Yeah, less than 5, but still. Maybe during our demo, I also remember. Would you recommend employing open telemetry? It's another question from Bogan. Employing open telemetry as a means to abstract away from my implementation details? Yes. This is idea that open telemetry, this is some additional layer that you can use because it's standard and supported by other different tools. You don't need to find, for example, if you use Serialog, and there are a lot of things, extensions for them, but it's still Serialog extension, and we should have something that supported by vendors, by big, I would say, corporation and vendors, and they invest in this money and integrate with own tools. Because, for example, Open Telemetry, there is native support for Azure, for Azure Monitor application inside. So you just add one more exporter, we'll see in the demo, and you're good to go. Or you can integrate with Grafana, for example, using this Open Telemetry. So this is, I would say, mature stack. Depends on data volume and notation. Best practice have multiple instances. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Alexander. Also, +1 for response that workspaces depends on data volume and retention. Best practice is having multiple instances. Yeah, it makes sense. And the last question for now from Bogdan. Is Open Telemetry has good support of exporters to export data in Azure Monitor? It's a great question, and let's see now demo how it looks like, and I'll provide answer for you how you can export data into Azure Monitor application inside. But now this is technically the same, because you can see in application insights, but exporter name is Azure Monitor. But you know, naming is hard. So, and before we start see how to implement, how to achieve, and how you can reuse this in your code, let me zoom in a little bit. So, issue with logging. Oh, it's something more than tooling, right? And I'd like to bring up this question as well, because usually you have log debug, you have log information, log trace, log warning, log error, log critical error. And if you don't have definition inside your project, if you don't have some agreement across your team, it will be issue regarding logs writing. Because what is difference between log error and log critical, and when to write log information and log warning, and what you should do with this data? And that's why this is not real iLogger interface, but it just to give you idea, so that you should define for your loggers levels and what each level means, and it should be clear for all your team members. Because, for example, in development mode, right, we can call in development mode log debug, log information, or maybe log trace. It's in development mode, so it means that we see only in development modes these logs, and nothing related to our deployment to environment, our remote environment. In production mode, right, that logs are critical for production support, for production analysis. Yeah, and also importance is crucial there, because if this is error, this is some warning, for example, is it urgent or no? Can I take and analyze it tomorrow during my business hours, or I should take and analyze this in the middle of the night, right? If it is error or it is critical error, and maybe my system is offline now. So yeah, technically you should define this sets level for you, and make sure that everyone in your teams understand how to produce these logs. So let's start with our sample application. It is available on GitHub. Just to share us that we have 4 services. We have order service, we have shipping services, order generator and billing services, and there is shared component across all of them. Order service and shipping service and billing services are communicated through RabbitMQ, just to demonstrate how we can use open telemetry, and it's not just HTTP calls. So it's still a simple scenario, because complex systems have more dependency, more components, more integration approaches, maybe even different brokers. But idea to show how you can create, trace, and chain all your information for your application. Let's go and review some techniques that also I like to recommend, and I use personally. Let's start with, I use nService bus, and there is older place handler. nService bus also for demo purposes, but also ideas that you even can integrate open telemetry standard with some external packages, like nService bus support open telemetry, and .NET supports open telemetry. So let's see something that is not related to open telemetry, but still you might have problems with that in your production if you do produce a lot of logs. So let's take a look. There is some method, or it might be some logger that do and write logs into our system, into our log service. So, and usually we have different levels of information, like something like that, right? We logs information, then we do something log error, and when we deploy to production, we might configure using our app settings files or any other approaches, how you configure and say, okay, I don't want to see any logs that have level of information. I want to see only warnings and errors. But still, in your code, you have logger, right? That writes logs into your system, but they are ignored with this log engine, but or your log library. But it's not a good idea if you have your critical, your hot path, you still even calling this method generate a string, because logs usually string, and we know that strings are immutable, and it's memory traffic, and you don't do some useful work, right? You just try to log, but it will be filtered by your log library, so you don't need this. And to avoid some additional memory traffic, it's good to add switch. Call switch is logger is enabled information. So you even don't call log write method, because you can check it before. If logger is enabled for this level, yeah, let's produce the string. If not, we can avoid this. Yeah, it's additional, it's boilerplate, and double work for do this, so you don't need to go and rewrite all your source code now to support different level, because it doesn't make sense. But if it is your critical path and you call a million times during the day, I would recommend to go and use this approach. But if you are on .NET 6, and I strongly believe that you are already on .NET 6, you can use extensions, you know, source code, this source code extension, source code generators now, and you can even write these source code generators, right? And to make this happen, for example, we use in our order place handler class, you should mark your class as a partial, because it's required for source code generator. And after that, just use attribute. You see, we should provide level, log level information, and message. And also see, I can pass parameters. And also, there is additional improvement because for your mission critical source code area, there is another approach. Let's review it. What is our code? Not our code, what is code generated for us for this log order receive event we use in our method. In by the way, also it should be partial and static, but let's see, this is one generated. So it will during build it generated for us, and you see that also they use additional approach. They create a logger message define and define our log. So it adds additional value because now you don't need to allocate memory each time for string, and string will be internet, and less traffic will be generated during your logs. And also, in addition, it's auto generated that it check log switch, that if logger level is warning, so even this code won't be invoked. So this is a cool feature, check source code generator for logger message, and you can start using it. It's really easy. Yes, some downsides that you should like static partial, and also the class should be partial, and it's code generation. Maybe it's not typical something for us, but still for some critical parts of your source code, you can write logs, do this in effective way, and you don't need to do trade-off analysis. Maybe we shouldn't write logs in this area because it's critical, but yeah, you can write, and but please use logger message define for your template and attributes to have to avoid boilerplate code, something like that. So regarding let me hide this. Okay, so let's review our configuration. How we want, how we can integrate serial log, and how we can integrate open telemetry for our .NET application. You see that I created shared library, and we create this host create builder default methods for our application. I say, okay, this is my extension, you share it serial log configuration, and also for configure services, I add open shared telemetry tracing. This is approach to pass configuration because we want to get some information and application name. Oh, and that's it. And now let's see our extension method. So configuration builder use serial log, but it's shared across all our projects. And you can navigate to GitHub and start from this template. It is used on several projects, so looks like that it's a good baseline. So what we are doing with serial log, today's presentation, it's not about serial log details or open telemetry, but how you can easily start. So there is no deep dive in each configuration setting. I like to point to someone extension and configurations that helps a lot for you, I hope. So read from configurations, that idea that we are good to have everything in the code, but maybe we want to do some specific for some service, and we can use our JSON file configuration or environment variables. But we can set default and say, okay, I want to override minimal level for all Microsoft information, for ASP.NET Core to warning, and logging middleware to information. I can do the same from my upsetting JSON file, but I want to make sure that all my projects reuse this and have the same settings. Also, we can enrich. If you remember, I say that you definitely need some systems that allows you to enrich or maybe even filter some data and remove data or mask data. Maybe it is AUS token, or you try to log credit card information. So, and also there is a lot of extensions, plugins for Serilog that can even speedline your performance. And if you use entity framework, you can use some exception destructor. So instead of using reflection, you can write your destructor, and that will get all information from exception as much as possible from some specific exception, just to show more important information than just stack trace with error message somewhere in the middle of the stack trace. If you're using Graphite, maybe you know this, there is API exception and there is specific API exception destructor. So also you can just plug in this extension for Serilog and see nice and clean exception messages with highlighted information, what is actually wrong. And also you can configure, and for example, I want to destructure HTTP content, or I don't want, and add some information. Maybe if you use correlation ID, so also you can enrich on your logs. So because your correlation ID you send with HTTP calls, but you want to trace and find all records with this correlation ID. And configuration. For example, if this hosting environment is development, let's see minimum level to debug and write everything to console and our local server that we can spin up. Also, if you download this project in the rider, but it's not a problem to find, you can spin up a Serilog Docker image, Jger, and the RabbitMQ is required for this solution working because it's message broker. If it is development, minimum level debug and write everything to console and write to our instance, and you can configure and maybe write to another thing. If it is not development, we don't want to see level less than warning, and we want to write to console only errors. No, it also depends. You can configure that you want to write warnings to one system and errors to another system, or it might be tables in database, or I don't know, even different files. So you have all information and all tools to configure this. Also, regarding application insights, Serilog might be integrated with application insights. It's not about open telemetry data now. It's about logs. So, and the metrics and events we can pass to application insight, Azure Monitor using open telemetry data exporter. We'll see in a moment. So, and if you have up inside connection string provided in your configuration, so we can add a new configuration. So we can configure and write to different components. We can write to application side, database, console, the different types of levels. You see that we send them as a traces and the log event warning. So we write into application insights starting from the level warning. But for console, we write a log level error. So you can use code definition for that, or using your JSON file for that. Also, if you're using Azure App Service, there is a log stream, and log stream is pretty good features, so you can easily navigate and see what is going with your application without even Azure Monitor and all other tools. You can see log stream. So for that, you can integrate with the way previous from documentation before it was there is no support for Linux app services, but documentation is updated, created pull request, but now you can see how easily you can integrate and also send information to your log stream inside Azure app service. So it's specific to Azure Web App. So it works for Windows and for Linux. So you just need to write your file. And of course, serial log request logging information. So just you can customize message if you don't like default one provided by ASP.NET Core. And let's quickly review OpenTelemetry configuration. So the same idea, we use services and we provide application name, add OpenTelemetry tracing, add source, some basic stuff, we set resource builder, provide telemetry SDK, and there is extension. For example, for ASP.NET Core instrumentation, we add support for ASP.NET Core instrumentation. You set up just NuGet packages for telemetry SDK, and you have basically the same for Java, for other languages. So you just need to configure this SDK. And also, as I mentioned, that it is used on production systems. You definitely want to filter some information about your health endpoint, some internals that are done by Azure App Service, they call robots, some digits .txt, and if they get 404, they understand that your container is up and running and ready to serve a request. So, but you don't want to see this in your traces and Swagger. Also, there is no sense to capture this information. Also, built in for HTTP client. So if you see there is no additional code required for HTTP client for all configuration. So if you use HTTP client factory, you don't need to change anything in your code, because HTTP client in .NET already expose information, OpenTelemetry information that can be captured by this SDK and exported to your targets. And also you add HTTP client instrumentation. You can say, okay, you can log information about HTTP protocol. It is HTTP 2, HTTP 1.1, record exception. Also, if you use Up Inside, you probably want to filter a request to Up Inside to send information to Up Inside. Also, if you use some localhost for development, we don't want to see all this information that serial log sends to SEQ. Also, you can filter. And of course, SQL, if you use entity framework, there is a SQL integration. And for example, there's a third party, right? And service bus. And also you can configure and add source, and service bus expose this data. So you can just add source and see how it works and how your message going through RabbitMQ. And by the way, if we want to add something additional, we can always add some information. So it's also using OpenTelemetry, but current activity is not something that provided by OpenTelemetry SDK. It is provided by .NET. So, and this is main idea, that .NET is already support, and they improved this support for standard like OpenTelemetry protocol, and you don't need even to use SDK if you want to build your library, your package. So you don't need to rely on some OpenTelemetry SDK. You just need to use .NET, and that's all. You have current activity. It shows extension diagnostics, by the way. It is interesting. But we'll see for our order generated program. Let me show. Yeah, this is Microsoft ASP.NET Core HTTP feature. So HTTP activity feature. So it's not related to open telemetry. So it just use and you add additional information, and it will be collected by OpenTelemetry SDK. And also regarding question, finally we can find answer for this. You collect information and you can set up, for example, for localhost or maybe for your production. You can add Jger exporter, or you can add Azure monitor trace exporter. So just to provide application inside connection string, and that's all. So if you don't want to use application inside now, you just ignore it. You want to use Jger, okay. If you decided to go with Zipin, okay. With Grafana, okay, just add additional exporter and that's it. Yep, there is a defined list of exporters, but still it is extra layer for you, and you don't need to rewrite and use native implementation. Also, you can use OpenTelemetry protocol, and I would say I would recommend even to use OpenTelemetry protocol, and you can use OpenTelemetry collector and configure to send this information to different targets like Grafana or Jger or Zipkin or whatever you want to use. So let's see one more feature provided by .NET that might be you didn't hear about. This is HTTP logging, native HTTP logging. If you want to log request and response for your API service, usually we created middleware and starting writing our own logic, how we want to write request query, headers, body, and response. And this is not easy to implement in optimal way, but also don't best approach to do this, because with .NET 6 you have add HTTP logging extension. It is built in and provided by Microsoft. It adds overhead for sure, because if you work with large body request response, you need to serialize, deserialize. It's additional memory allocation, but you can configure it, and it writes more effective than usually we do from the ground. So it's optimized version, and there is a lot of configuration. You can use logging fields. You might say different, I want to request or response. I want to add some request headers, because by default it will be redacted, because you don't want to log your access token, not your access token, maybe client's access token. And also there is some limitation. You can set up if request body is more than some number, so just keep it, because it's will be memory overhead, or maybe it's a gigabyte of data in your logs. Request response, and that's all. And only one thing you should add besides this HTTP logging middleware. This is added in serial log configuration. You need to set information level, because if it is not information, you won't see any request response logged into your target. So let's see this in an action, and we can go back to our Q&A session. I'm using another tool, because to use Jger, something wrong with my laptop. Some corporate policies does not allow to open easily port for UDP communication. I don't know why, but I have VM for that. So let me run all my services. And as I mentioned, there is a Docker image for Jger and Serialog. Let's see what we have there. Okay, so something is going on. Okay, let's see what we have. Okay, we have shipping service, we have order service working here, publishing some orders, we have order generator, billing service, processing something. Okay, order generator, and also let me call my API orders, because now order generator puts inside RabbitMQ placeholder command, and also let me invoke my API, my order generator, but this is HTTP call. So, and now let's see how HTTP logging working, right? So let's configure it. Let's see, you see that where it is. Okay, so we see information. We have request, we have protocol, method, everything is captured, including our correlation ID, request body, what we received, and also we captured our response and sent our response that HTTP orders command. So now we can logs navigate using sec, right? And you see a lot of logs. We see that shipping, publishing, receiving, some processing, serializing, so a lot of information and a lot of enriched information like machine name, order ID. So if I want to filter everything by this order ID, you can find by this value, filter everything by order ID, and there's a structured logging. So it's not something that you need to additionally parse using some regex or something like that. So let's navigate and see, because it's pretty typical, you know, if you use application insights or other tool, but it is good for local development. You have everything, you have tool, and you can search, navigate, filter. It is very powerful. Let's see Jger. So what we have services. We have billing services. This is Jger query. It is internal. Order generator. Let's see order generator. We have also some operations. Order service sent. It's sent message using N service bus into RabbitMQ. We have API orders. This is our REST API. So let's see. We found all operations. We see that we sent order and there is some additional activities for that. Let's find 2 minutes ago, we created our orders through API, and you can see and navigate. There are some additional information. We see that HTTP target, status code, server. We see that we sent message. We created message using N service bus, so it was our next call with some additional information. We see message payload there. So if we want to add some additional, like for example, transaction ID for our billing service, right? As I show on this is. Something wrong with my UI. Okay, order service. It's order generator, billing service. Yeah, here we go. So, and for example, using billing service and add additional field, payment transaction ID, to this billing service if I want to correlate with some transaction ID or store this information. So it's a really great tool for your local development. Even you can use in production, but if you use application inside, you have the same flow for application inside. Let me collapse it. Okay, yeah, and billing service. And you can easily navigate and see how it processes, how it works. Even if you just started to see, okay, what is my flow, how it is working, based on this communication, you can navigate and see how you. Let me open. Yeah, how it is working, how usually your system works, right? We have order generators that communicates with order service, and order service communicates with our shipping and billing service. It just quick overview of your application, of your solutions map and components that builds on these traces, so how they communicate for each other. And integration with Serilog, for example, let me open and refresh and see, okay, billing service has received order places, maybe some error, and now I have all logs, but I want to see quickly how it works. And shipping service was called, or I don't know, maybe another service was participated in my flow. Oh, and I can just copy trace ID and find by trace ID and restore this timeline. Maybe I want to understand why it takes 5 minutes, and I can see, okay, it was fast, order service was fast, shipping service was fast, and billing service was fast. So this is idea regarding this open telemetry. So sometimes you need to visualize to analyze your data more quickly and in more elegant way. So this is a quick overview of these tools and telemetry data approach and techniques, how you can improve your existing approach and incorporate into your project. So let's see, maybe you have some questions. You definitely have, and start. Okay, what was last? Okay, last was, is Open Telemetry has good support of exporters to export data into Azure Monitor? Yes, it works. It is under preview, but all critical issues, so not issues critical, yeah, issues with visualizing of this inside application inside are resolved in all betas, and you are good to go and use for your production environment and integrate with Azure application inside Open Telemetry. Question from you again. Open Telemetry SDK versus Microsoft iLogger interface that you would like to use in logging in .NET application. Microsoft Logger interface is good enough, and it's integrated with Serilog and Open Telemetry logs in the future. So you can see that this is, for example, iLogger. This is from Microsoft extension login. So use it. No worries about that. Let me navigate. Maybe we have program. Yeah, log information and everything integrated with Serilog. So yeah, Microsoft Logger is good, and you just plug in Serilog and that's it. So Microsoft Logger, yeah, it's my preferred way. You have experience to use ML to process logging to spot some abnormal behavior? Okay, good question. Application Insights has proactive monitoring, and you can use proactive monitoring or maybe if it is not enough, you have to build your own using some stream analytics, or maybe build or maybe use other tools, maybe Datadog or New Relic, maybe they provide. But application inside has built-in proactive monitoring for different cool scenarios. For example, if your error rate is more than 1 day before, they can notify you and also provide insights, and also create some snapshot for you and say, okay, there are 100 requests that are slow, or maybe they have 500 errors, so it is not usual. Yeah, first option, I would say, go with application insight and see capabilities. But if you are developing your own product, yeah, you should do your own ML. Would you recommend to use automation workloads, Azure automation, based on your logs metrics and any samples from your experience? Yes, it's definitely a good idea. Sometimes if you have a lot of errors, maybe it's memory leak inside your service, inside your project, and while you are looking to find and fix this memory leak, you can configure and say, okay, if we have more than 90% of memory, use it, so we can just restart our service. So yeah, why not? Okay, question from Alexei. For serial log, we can add specific log level for config file and filter level for current environment. Am I wrong? We can add specific log level to config file for current environment. Yeah, you are not wrong. Yeah, you are right. Yeah, you can add specific log level for config file and filter level. Yeah, but if you're referring to this sample, it's something more because there is idea that even you don't call this code, because now we filter on level of our code. But before, if you don't use the switch, you should to generate a new string to pass your log library, and you already allocated object, but log library say, okay, I filtered this request, you can dispose your objects. So this is what's idea, to optimize on your code level. When you use attribute with log level, how you can manage log level without rebuild application? If you mean a log level in configuration filtering, so yes, if, for example, this log order receive event information was incorrect log level, and we should use warning, or I don't know, maybe debug. Warning is not a good example. Maybe debug. Yes, you need to rebuild application. And logger message, what is required? Attributes. Maybe we can do something like that. Let me check. What is our signature? Let's say rebuild. Okay, yeah, it is required value. So yeah, unfortunately, yeah, you have to provide, but still you can create, if you remember, there is logger message define message. So in event ID, yeah, just event ID. So you can use in this case logger message define if you want to reuse the same template for different types of log levels. Yeah, but answering to your question, yes, you have to rebuild application, but if you change log level, you still in your code, you need to rebuild. Do you usually store your serial log configuration, the source code, or in configurations of data without recompilation without app configuration? Yep, great question. Where is our serial log configuration? So see, I have some default configuration that is baseline. If you want to update something or override, this is additional line. Read from configuration, so it's from JSON file or from environment variables because it's configuration, right? And this is configuration that takes environment variables, secrets, whatever you configure as your configuration providers, and also read from services. So you can add lines, or you can move these lines and make sure you don't override something. This is you can think about it like policies. For example, even you say in configuration, I want to have all information for Microsoft namespace and use level debug, it will be overridden by our policy, something like that. So, but you can definitely configure and split your configuration across different configuration providers. Okay, question: do you believe is that one day in our of C# log libraries like serial log and log, a vulnerability will be found as it was recently found in Java log4j? Probably, yeah, because each month we have updates from Microsoft, and this library depends on some packages. Yep, but maybe something critical. I don't know. Yeah, but who knows? Is it possible to instrument client-side code with OpenTelemetry? Yes, client-side JavaScript. Yeah, you can instrument OpenTelemetry. This is standard. This is standard how you send information with. Let me open. This is span format, and how you send this conversation correlation ID. So you definitely need to check. There's a span activity, and it is possible, but I didn't have real experience with client side with JavaScript to integrate with OpenTelemetry. Is there a way to set up notification when something bad happens, preferably only if that haven't happened before? For example, App Center, telemetry collector for mobile apps, send emails if new exception group is detected. Yes, you can configure, and there was a question like in your logs analytics, you can set up even in Serilog on your local environment, you can set up some signals. So yeah, it is pretty common. Yeah. Azure has, and other tools also has this alert system. This part of code. How do you usually handle metrics? So far, you showed collection logs and tracing data. Do you have health checks, check metrics, CPU load, memory? A great question. Yeah, and thank you for that question, because I definitely forgot to say. Metrics is just released by OpenTelemetry, so didn't try on production, but now you can use even Jger for your metrics, and there is a monitor tab. So, and you can using OpenTelemetry and pass information. So I would recommend to go and still see this experimental, but it should work. And using Jger or application inside using OpenTelemetry. But for metrics, you should write metrics to Grafana, for example, to visualize them. And also you can do this easily with extension. Also, you can add metrics this is instrumentation, and using SDK, you add metrics and you add your exporter to Grafana. So yeah, it is supported by OpenTelemetry, but I didn't use this in production because it was not ready, and they just released these metrics. They have specifications, they have standard for logs and metrics, but it's not ready for production by SDK. Okay, do we have some abilities to measure performance impact of logging? Good question. I don't know, maybe just benchmarking, but usually someone says this is overhead. I don't know, maybe this is a rule of thumb. And I remember it says, if you instrument your application with some new relic or application inside SDK with some interceptors, it might add up to 20% of overhead. With OpenTelemetry, I think it's even less because there is no interceptor. It is integrated natively with .NET platform using activity source. So maybe, but still overhead will be, for example, if you enable HTTP logging, so it depends, but you can measure it, right? You can create benchmarks that use application and run, but I would say it's around from 5 to 20% of overhead will be added. Okay, so looks like we are done with questions that was in a list. Maybe someone want to add something or even unmute.
Yeah, guys, please, if you want to be unmuted, you can push raise hand button and I will unmute you so you can speak. Seems like no raise hand by now and no new questions in the chat, so we can maybe choose the winners. Like, no, we, but you.
Yeah, okay, 3 winners, right?
Yes, 3.
Okay, first, for sure, Bogdan Cherny.
Okay. And by the way, we have one new question.
Yes, I'm just listening. Second one, Yevgen Tatarinov. Sorry if I mispronounce somehow. And third one, Maxim Koshavy.
Okay, great, amazing. And we have the last question from Maxim, by the way.
Yes. So and thank you so much for questions. They're really amazing. And why answer with bus instead of mass transit? No explanation. Answer with bus because it was used on project and just to show on demo. Mass transit the same. You can use and also integrate it with OpenTelemetry. Yep, you can use, but for demo purposes there is no reason. It's just something that integrated and just to show demonstrated.